White cop points gun at black man, laughs at his badge, then got arrested. The desert sun had finally dipped low enough to cast a golden hue across the horizon, softening the heat that had scorched southern Arizona all afternoon. Elijah Monroe, 41, pulled into a nearly empty gas station off Route 86, about 30 miles west of Tucson. He wasn't looking for gas, just a few minutes of silence. His black government-issued Ford Explorer came to a quiet stop beside an abandoned soda machine. Its red paint faded to a dusty rose under the sun. Wearing a crisp navy suit and a sand-colored dress shirt, Elijah looked like a man on official business, which he was. A senior field investigator with the Department of Energy's National Security Division, he had just wrapped up a 2-day inspection of a decommissioned weapons site. He wasn't armed, he wasn't undercover, he was just tired. Whoa! With the engine off and the windows cracked, Elijah leaned back in his seat, taking a sip from a half-melted bottle of water and skimming messages on his encrypted phone. Most were status updates, lab reports, and a calendar invite he didn't remember accepting, some internal policy seminar on implicit bias. He chuckled dryly at that, the irony not lost on him. It was peaceful. No noise except the occasional whir of cicadas and the gentle hum of the power lines that stretched out like stitched threads across the desert. He figured 10 minutes here would be enough. Just 10 to breathe, to reset. Then he noticed the sheriff's cruiser roll in. It didn't park at a pump. It didn't pull up to the station. It drove in slow, made a wide circle, and stopped directly behind Elijah's Explorer. Not blocking him entirely, but close enough to feel deliberate. Elijah glanced in the rearview mirror. The deputy hadn't stepped out yet. Just sat there, idling, engine humming. Elijah's hands paused over his phone. Not fear, just awareness. The kind that comes from experience, from being a black man in remote America. From knowing that, even in a government vehicle, even in a suit, even with federal credentials in your pocket, you could still be the suspect. He exhaled, slow and measured, and waited. Then the driver's door of the cruiser creaked open, and a tall figure stepped out, boots crunching over gravel. A tan uniform, mirrored sunglasses, one hand resting on the butt of a holstered sidearm. Elijah straightened in his seat. The break was over. The deputy walked with slow, deliberate steps, his mirrored shades hiding his eyes, but not the tension in his posture. The nameplate on his chest read T. McConnell. He looked to be in his late 40s, sun-worn skin, thick frame, jaw clenched tight like it had something to prove. Elijah rolled down the window halfway before the deputy could knock. "Afternoon, officer," he said calmly, hands visible on the steering wheel. "Is there a problem?" McConnell didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned down, elbows pressed to the edge of the open window, his eyes hidden behind those cold lenses, his voice clipped and low. "What are you doing here?" Elijah blinked. "Just taking a short break. I'm on official travel." "You got ID?" "I do," Elijah replied, keeping his voice even. "I'm a federal agent with the Department of Energy. My credentials are in my jacket, left inside pocket." McConnell's lips curled just slightly, not a smile, more like a twitch of amusement. "Department of Energy?" he said, as if tasting the words. "That what they're calling it now? I'm happy to show you my badge." "I bet you are." The silence stretched. Elijah kept his posture steady, shoulders square, hands still resting where they could be seen. He'd had briefings on encounters like these, how to de-escalate, how to stay calm. But briefings didn't account for body language. They didn't account for the way a man's tone could cut deeper than any curse word. Nodding, McConnell shifted his stance. His hand never left the holster. "You from around here?" he asked suddenly. "No," Elijah answered. "As I said, I'm a federal investigator, based out of New Mexico. I just finished an inspection down the road." McConnell sniffed. "Funny. Don't see many suits out here unless they're lost, or hiding something." Elijah's grip on the steering wheel tightened just slightly. He knew this wasn't about a traffic stop. It wasn't about a complaint. It was something else. Something unspoken but deeply familiar. He nodded once, slowly. "Look, if you'd like to verify my identity, I can give you the number for my agency's duty officer." "I said," McConnell interrupted, Keep your hands where I can see them. We'll get to that. Another pause. The wind rustled across the flat land beyond the gas station. A hawk screeched somewhere far off. Time stretched again, like the whole world was holding its breath. Then McConnell took a half step back and unlatched the retention strap on his holster with a practiced flick. Elijah heard the sound and felt the weight of it. And one sach mi ki, it was a warning, a threat dressed as protocol. He didn't flinch. Instead, he spoke clearly. Deputy, I am a federal officer, unarmed, on official business. I am not a threat. I am requesting that you either verify my credentials or call your supervisor. McConnell didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at him through those mirrored lenses, like he wasn't seeing a badge but a problem. And for Elijah, the calculation had already begun. Again, height, roughly 6 feet 2 inches. Weight, over 220. Right-handed, gun holstered, now unsecured. No radio call-in, no backup in sight. And worst of all, no intent to listen. Elijah's jaw tensed. He'd been trained for pressure, but not for this kind of silence, the kind where every second becomes a risk. He didn't know how far this would go, but he knew what it meant. McConnell's jaw shifted, the muscle flexing beneath his stubble like he was weighing his next move. Then, as if the decision had already been made long before Elijah ever pulled into that lot, he reached for his weapon. Lean sights gopsy. The motion was smooth, practiced, mechanical, and terrifying. Brass. Elijah didn't move, didn't breathe. The deputy's pistol came up, the black barrel leveling through the half-open window until it stopped. Inches from Elijah's temple. The world narrowed. There was no more sun, no desert wind, no distant birds, just the metal of the gun, the cold sweat at the base of Elijah's neck, and the mirrored lenses reflecting his own still face back at him. Out of the car, McConnell growled, finger tight along the trigger guard. Now! Elijah didn't move. His voice came out firm but low. You're pointing a loaded weapon at a federal officer, deputy. You understand the gravity of that? You think that badge of yours makes you untouchable? McConnell spat. You sit here in a black SUV with government plates like you're above it all. Elijah held his ground. I've done nothing. I've sat here. Quietly. You escalated this. You fit a profile, McConnell snapped. Elijah narrowed his eyes. What profile is that? McConnell didn't answer. He didn't need to. The weight of that silence said everything Elijah had heard his entire life, in different forms, in different towns, in different uniforms. The implication that his existence was suspicious, that his presence had to be justified, explained, defended, and now justified at gunpoint. I'm going to reach for my credentials, Elijah said clearly, eyes steady. Inside pocket. Slow. I didn't say you could move. I'm not going to sit here with a gun aimed at my head while you pretend this is a routine stop. Call it in, verify me. That's protocol. McConnell shook his head slowly, gun still raised. You don't get to lecture me on protocol. Not out here. This is my jurisdiction. Another moment passed. Then a voice cut through the desert air. Hey, what the hell is going on? Elijah turned his head slightly. A woman stood near the corner of the station, holding a bag of ice in a six-pack, her face pale under a ball cap. Her voice wavered but carried. McConnell didn't turn. Ma'am, this doesn't concern you. It sure looks like it does, she called. He's not even out of the car. Then came another voice. Male. Closer. I'm recording this, officer, just so you know. McConnell's jaw twitched. His left eye flinched. The gun didn't lower, but the control he thought he had was beginning to slip, and Elijah could feel it. The shift in power. The mag. The truth crawling into the open air, camera by camera, witness by witness. He still hadn't moved. But now, he wasn't alone. The scene had changed. What started as a quiet moment between one man and a coffee-stained inbox had become a small spectacle in a sun-baked parking lot. McConnell still held the gun trained on Elijah, but the authority in his stance had started to waver, not because of anything Elijah did, but because the eyes were arriving. The woman with the ice had stepped back but hadn't left. Her bag hung forgotten at her side. A man in a red pickup truck had pulled in and cracked his window, phone raised. A teenager on a BMX bike stood near the curb, frozen, recording with a trembling hand. The truth was now being archived. Sir, "Why is your weapon drawn?" the man in the red truck called out. "He hasn't even gotten out of the car." McConnell turned his head a fraction. "Step back. I'm handling a possible threat." Elijah's laugh was dry. Low. Disbelieving. "I've said nothing but cooperate. I haven't moved. You never asked for ID. Never called it in. You pulled a gun because I was sitting in a car." "You were acting suspicious," McConnell snapped. "Sipping water in a parking lot?" Elijah said louder, making sure the growing crowd could hear. "Wearing a suit? With federal plates? That's your suspicion?" McConnell's eyes darted. Left, right, back to Elijah. The heat was rising. Not from the desert, but from the scrutiny. The illusion of control he'd cloaked himself in was thinning, thread by thread. "You don't understand how things work out here," he muttered. "I understand exactly," Elijah replied. "I understand you didn't ask who I was. You just saw who I wasn't." The deputy's finger twitched near the trigger. Just a flinch. But Elijah caught it. So did the woman across the lot, who let out a faint gasp. The man in the truck leaned out farther. "You really going to shoot a man in a suit while the whole town watches?" he asked. Elijah exhaled. "They already know. They've seen it before. Just not with someone like me." McConnell's hand started to lower, but not all the way. Not yet. His pride still had a grip on the weapon, even if the rest of him had begun to tremble under the weight of consequence. Then, the sound of tires. Heavy, steady. A black Suburban turned the corner. Fast. Deliberate. It rolled over the gravel with silent purpose and pulled in behind McConnell's cruiser with surgical precision. Government plates. Elijah didn't smile. But inside, something settled. Chi. His team had arrived. The doors opened in unison. 2 agents stepped out. Clean black suits, mirrored glasses, crisp earpieces. One was a woman, late 40s, sharp eyes scanning the scene. The other, a taller man with a broad chest and clenched jaw, already had his hand near his belt. Firecoat. They didn't need to speak. Their presence was the message. Baigu. McConnell took a step back. His gun didn't drop, but his certainty did. You could see it leaking from his face. Whatever story he thought he was controlling had just slipped out of his hands and into the hands of the federal government. Elijah finally spoke again, his voice steady, clear. "Deputy, you are now pointing a weapon at a verified federal agent. On camera. Surrounded by witnesses. This is your last moment to walk away with anything left of your badge." McConnell didn't move, but now he was the one being watched, and he knew it. The female agent stepped forward first, her movement fluid and composed like someone used to taking control without ever raising her voice. Her badge was already in hand, flashed once, swift and unquestionable. "Deputy," she said evenly, "lower your weapon." McConnell hesitated. For a breath. Maybe 2. Then, like a man trying to reclaim ground he never truly held, he barked back. "He never identified himself. I had reason to believe he was impersonating an officer." The taller male agent joined her flank. He didn't speak yet, just stood there like a wall in a tailored suit, shoulders wide, jaw locked, eyes unreadable behind mirrored shades. "You had no cause to draw a weapon," the woman continued. "You didn't request ID, you didn't call it in, and you escalated a non-confrontational situation with deadly force." McConnell's voice faltered. He wouldn't cooperate." "I said I was a federal officer 5 separate times," Elijah said from inside his vehicle, voice calm but louder now for the bystanders. "I stated my agency. I indicated where my credentials were. You refused to verify any of it. You just pulled your weapon." McConnell's hand finally dropped, just a little. His shoulders slumped with it. The gun lowered a few inches but didn't leave his hand. The male agent's voice cut in, low, controlled, final. "Place the weapon on the ground. Now." It was no longer a suggestion. McConnell looked at the gathering crowd, at the dozens of phones raised like mirrors, reflecting his choices back at him. He looked at Elijah one last time, then slowly crouched, placing the weapon on the hot pavement with a shaky clunk. He straightened and raised both hands slightly, palms out, as if trying to preserve some small dignity. The female agent stepped forward, removing his belt-mounted radio and sidearm holster with swift, practiced motions. "You are being disarmed," she said. "You no longer have authority over this scene." "What? You can't just," McConnell began, but the words stumbled out weak and useless. "You drew a weapon on a federal officer without cause," the male agent said. "That is a federal offense." The cuffs came out. "No, hold on," McConnell stammered. "This is a misunderstanding. There's nothing unclear about this," the woman replied. "Turn around." McConnell froze. For just a moment. Then, with his pride fighting his hands, he slowly turned. Click. The cuffs locked around his wrists like punctuation on a sentence no one wanted to finish. Gasps came from the onlookers. One woman clapped a hand over her mouth. The man in the truck muttered, "Jesus," and kept recording. Elijah finally opened his door. He stepped out slowly, adjusting his suit jacket with one hand and straightening the crease with the other. "I'm okay," he announced, loud enough for the crowd to hear. "Let's keep this professional." The agents nodded. The woman, Agent Navarro, gave him a subtle look that carried more than words. "I saw it. We all saw it." And for the first time in the last 30 minutes, Elijah breathed freely. McConnell didn't resist. He couldn't. The cuffs weren't just metal around his wrists. They were the closing credits to a show he no longer directed. Agent Navarro guided him to the edge of the lot, while the male agent, now identified by the name tag Reed, remained at Elijah's side. The onlookers, still filming, still silent, parted slightly to give them room, but no one left. The story had crossed a line. It wasn't just one man's mistake anymore. It was a reflection of something bigger. Within minutes, another vehicle pulled in, unmarked, silver sedan. Inside was a red-faced man in khakis and a polo with a badge on his belt, McConnell's supervisor. He stepped out like someone already bracing for impact. "What the hell is going on here?" he asked, eyes darting from McConnell in cuffs to the two federal agents. Navarro didn't blink. "Your deputy pulled a loaded weapon on a federal officer without any legal justification, in public, on camera, surrounded by witnesses." Supervisor's face went pale. We'll handle this internally." Agent Reed stepped forward, arms folded. "No, you won't." The supervisor opened his mouth, then closed it again. Reed pulled a small folder from inside his jacket and handed it over. Inside were printed credentials, a statement of Elijah's federal ID verification, and a preliminary incident report. "This is already above your pay grade. You have to understand, if he thought wrong," Reed interrupted. "He almost shot wrong. That shut the man up." Navarro turned to Elijah. "Do you want to file this formally?" Elijah glanced around. McConnell sat slumped in the back of a second cruiser now, staring forward like a man trying to replay a decision he couldn't rewind. The crowd had started murmuring. Video footage was already being uploaded. One teen had a TikTok caption open. Another woman was live streaming to Facebook. He turned to Navarro. "Yes," he said. "We file it." "Understood." Navarro walked off to finalize the paperwork. A woman from earlier, the one with the ice, approached Elijah slowly. "You okay?" she asked. That could have gone really bad." Elijah looked at her. The exhaustion finally showed in his face. "It almost did," he said. She nodded and offered a small, sympathetic smile. "You handled that better than I could have." He returned a faint nod. "I didn't have a choice." She paused, then turned and walked away. Reed came up beside him again, handing over a bottle of water. "You good?" he asked. Elijah opened it, took a sip. "Yeah, just tired." They stood there in silence for a while, the heat of the desert cooling into a twilight wind. Then Reed asked, "You sure you want to push this forward? It'll get attention." Elijah looked at the SUV, the empty space where his piece had once been, and then back at the phone cameras still hovering like ghosts around the edges. "If I don't file it," he said slowly, "what's to stop him from doing it again? Next time, maybe to someone without a badge." Reed didn't respond. He didn't need to. They both knew the answer. By the time the second sun dipped below the distant ridgeline, the parking lot had cleared of spectators, but the digital echoes remained. Dozens of videos had already been uploaded to social media. Different angles, different voices, but all showing the same truth. A federal agent, unarmed, calm, composed, held at gunpoint by a local deputy who never even asked for a name. Inside the unmarked cruiser, McConnell sat handcuffed in silence, head low, the reality catching up to him like heat off the asphalt. He hadn't said a word since being read his rights. The badge on his chest seemed smaller now, stripped of its weight, its power. Whatever narrative he thought he controlled had been taken from him, pixel by pixel, witness by witness. Back near the gas station, Agent Navarro handed Elijah a printed report draft for review. He skimmed it. Everything matched. The time, the details, the quotes. His own voice quoted back to him, calm, precise. Still, reading it felt surreal. "You okay with submitting this version?" Navarro asked. Elijah nodded. "Yeah, it's accurate." Nearby, the man from the red pickup truck approached. His phone now rested at his side, screen still open. He looked sheepish, almost apologetic. "Hey, I got the whole thing on video, from when he first pulled up. No edits. You want a copy?" Elijah looked him in the eye. "Hold on to it. The department may reach out." The man nodded. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. You shouldn't have gone through that." Elijah gave a small nod but said nothing. Because what was there to say? The liar? That he appreciated it? That it made a difference? That the damage wasn't already done? Eventually, the Tucson Sheriff's Department sent a liaison, a middle-aged Latina officer who looked as though she had seen too many mistakes like this one. She didn't speak much, just confirmed that the footage was being reviewed, that McConnell was being detained, and that internal affairs had already been notified. "I'll make sure this goes where it needs to go," she promised quietly. Elijah just nodded. Because for him, it wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about punishing one man. It was about the weight of silence and refusing to carry it anymore. As the last cruiser rolled away with McConnell in the back seat, Elijah stood under the fading light. The wind had picked up again. Dust swirled along the road's edge, and for a moment, it felt like the world had taken a breath. He turned toward Navarro and Reed, who stood beside the explorer. "I'm heading back to Albuquerque," Elijah said. "My report's due in the morning." "You sure?" Reed asked. "We can have someone drive you. Let you rest." Elijah gave a tired smile. "No, I need the drive. Might be the only peace I get today." Navarro stepped forward and shook his hand. "You did everything right." "I know," he said. But even as he slid into the driver's seat, as he closed the door and turned the key, the thought remained. Doing everything right still almost got me killed. And that truth demanded more than paperwork. It demanded witnesses. Elijah drove east as the desert turned to shadow. The sun had vanished completely now, replaced by stars just beginning to pierce the twilight sky. The hum of the road beneath him was steady, familiar. It should have brought comfort. It didn't. His hands stayed loose on the steering wheel, but the tension hadn't left his shoulders. Not really. Not after what happened. Not after a weapon had been aimed at his head for doing nothing more than sitting in a car while black, wearing a suit, and daring to exist without explanation. He'd thought the badge would protect him. Nadak, ban, Glak. He was wrong. Banned, Dadak Sen. He'd thought the government plates, the crisp suit, the years of federal service would be enough. Orant. What protected him was the arrival of a team, a camera, a crowd. And even then, it was a close call. Back in D.C., people would read the report, maybe even investigate McConnell, maybe suspend or fire him. But none of that would rewind the moment the barrel of a gun hovered inches from Elijah's temple. None of it would undo the sound of the retention strap unbuckling, the calculation, the restraint, the knowing that if he had raised a hand, just one, he might be dead. And worse, the story would have been different. Because stories always are when the person who lived it isn't around to correct them. The truth was simple. A badge doesn't protect everyone the same. Not when your skin makes the wrong people nervous. That good. Not when silence is louder than policy. That good. Not when fear gets to masquerade as protocol. There are men and women across this country who wake up every day and wear a uniform with integrity, who walk into danger so others don't have to. But there are also those who wear the same uniform like armor, not to defend justice, but to dominate it. And the more we ignore that, the more lives we gamble. Elijah didn't know if McConnell would face charges. He didn't know if the videos would go viral, or if the sheriff's department would bury it all behind press releases and passive language. But he knew this. He was going to file the report. He was going to speak up, because if he didn't, who would? And because someone out there, tomorrow, next week, next year, might not have a badge, might not have a team pulling in at the last second, might not have a phone recording, pogo, they'll just have their skin. And if that's all they have, they'll need someone to have told the truth. If this story moved you, reminded you that healing is real, or renewed your belief in second chances, we invite you to subscribe to Healing Stories. Here, we share real-life journeys of strength, love, and hope. Stories that speak straight to the soul. Thank you for being here. And always remember, no matter how far you fall, there's always a way back to the light. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below and let us know.